Hello everybody, welcome to A British Audiophile. For those of you who are new to this channel, my name is Taryn. Today I'm taking a look at a mini monitor. You know, the kind of speaker that you can pick up with one hand? Well, at least I can pick up with one hand, but then I do have these ridiculously long fingers. So what's the deal with a mini monitor? Most of you are probably aware that they're designed primarily for near field listening at the end of a desk, in a study, or in a bedroom where you're probably listening between 1 or 2 meters away from the speaker. Having the drivers close together is a major benefit in that regard. But if you've got them in a bigger room, surely you can just add a subwoofer and they'll do the job, right? Well, not necessarily, but we'll get into that later on. There's something else I want to discuss first. For many people, the definitive mini monitor is still the LS3 despite the fact that it saw the light of day over 55 years ago. It's prized for its mid-range openness and rich tonality, and quite rightly so, but the cost has gone up quite considerably over the last few decades as well, and that's partly because of the materials used, whether it's the Mylar tweeter, the Beckstream woofer, the Tigan grill cloth, or the ply cabinet. Cheaper Chinese replicas have entered the marketplace and have been well received by no other than people like myself, and I think for fairly good reason. Okay, they don't have the same exotic materials, but they retain many of the sonic characteristics of the BBC original for a fraction of the price. Last year I reviewed the Sound Artist LS3 replica. By the time you've paid for shipping and taxes here in the UK, it's going to cost you the best part of £800. Now come on, surely the mini monitor game has moved on from the LS3 in over half a century. Well, yes and no. The modern era of loudspeaker design was ushered in by people like Floyd Toole and his disciples at the NRC, Sean Olive, who went on to work for Harman Kardon and the many brands that they represent, and Paul Barton, who was the founder of PSB Speakers. Their objective was to produce speakers based on measurements that were relatively flat, had good directivity, which meant that the on-axis performance was very similar to the off-axis performance, making them much easier to place within a room, and also free from any significant resonances. I've owned one of Paul Barton's top-of-the-line mini monitors for quite some time, the PSB Imagine Mini. Don't let its £600 to £700 price tag fool you. This was one of the finest mini monitors ever produced. It's a shame that it's now been discontinued. It's the kind of speaker that the hardline objectivist would just drool over and wave the measurement sheet in front of you with a smug smile on their face. But how does it sound? Well, it has exceptional clarity, and given its size, it's got a decent amount of power handling and is fairly dynamic as well. But I think most people would agree it's certainly analytical sounding. To some people, especially those who like the sound of the LS3 it just downright sounds sterile. Surely there's some other alternatives out there. Today I'm taking a look at what DALI have to offer, their upgraded version of their long-standing Menuet, the Menuet SE. Surely there can't be a speaker that combines the best characteristics of the Sound Artist LS3 as well as the PSB Imagine Mini for what most would consider not significantly more outlay. Well, that's exactly what I found out. The special edition version of DALI's long-standing Menuet retails for £1,299 in the UK, available in a premium high-gloss, wild walnut, real wood veneer finish. It looks stunning in the flesh. The photos really don't do it justice, but it's a shame that the grills aren't magnetic. This really is a compact mini monitor, measuring 250 by 150 millimeters and 230 millimeters deep, weighing 4.2 kilograms apiece. Imperial measurements are 9.8 by 5.9 by 9.0 inches and 8.2 pounds. Drivers carry over from the standard model with a 28mm 1.1 inch soft dome tweeter, and the 115mm 4.5 inch mid woofer has the wood fibre cone that DALI speakers are renowned for. The rear houses two very high quality binding posts, a technology cascaded down from DALI's range topping high-end Epicon series. There's a port cleverly concealed behind them and two grommets that can be removed to reveal threaded inserts to enable mounting to DALI's optional wall bracket. I'm going to keep this section very short because this video is going to be long enough as it is. I just want to clarify what you get extra for your £300 with the SE model over the standard model. Surely it's not just the fancy walnut finish. No, you get an improved crossover as well. You get Mundorf capacitors, but the actual crossover board itself is improved. The material it's made from has better electrical isolation, and that's supposed to lower distortion. A couple of other things that are worth noting about the design is that DALI claimed that their soft dome tweeter cone is about 30% lighter than you typically get on a tweeter around this price. Lighter cone means lower moving mass, and again, that should help to improve clarity. The other thing that DALI make a big deal about is the voice coil former in the mid-woofer. That's the actual cone that the voice coil wraps itself around. It's made from fiberglass, and DALI claim that that helps to reduce mechanical loss in the voice coil, and that helps to lower distortion as well. Right, so let me get straight to it. This DALI Menuet SE is by some margin the best sounding mini monitor that I've heard in my home. But there's certain things it can do and certain things it can't do. And I want to start by addressing the scenario I posed at the beginning of this video. Can you simply add a subwoofer and can it do the job of bigger speakers? And I have to say in that regard, the answer is no. If you're the kind of person who wants to rock out at loud volumes, you need bigger speakers. Sure, adding a subwoofer gives you more bass extension, more depth, more weight to the bass, and that has an impact on dynamics. And this mini monitor with a decent sub will run a bigger speaker very close. But there's dynamic swings further up the frequency range, which a mini monitor simply can't do. That's just simply the law of physics. So let me break down a little bit more how this speaker sounds. Officially, the low frequencies roll off by 3 dB at 59 Hz. So you're not only missing the lowest octave, you're also missing some of that mid-bass punch. There's a simple fix for this, just add a subwoofer, but it needs to be a good one because the bass that is available from this speaker is super agile, embarrassing many larger speakers at higher price points. The mid-range, hallelujah. Can you sense my enthusiasm coming through? It has everything, exceptional clarity and tonality. So let me just explain. There's a number of speakers that I've reviewed that are exceptionally clean sounding. The Amphion Argon 3S, the PMC 2521Is, and yes, my own PSB Imagine Minis. The thing is, if you've developed your listening skills to a certain extent, as soon as you play something acoustic or vocal centric through those speakers, you're aware that there's something artificial sounding, even though you might be really impressed with the amount of information that the speaker's able to pull off a recording. The illusion of a live performance in your living space is lost. There are other speakers that have that natural tonality but struggle in terms of ultimate clarity, and again, the veil is lifted from the curtain. Examples of that would be the Q Acoustic Concept 300s, the Fine Audio F700s, and yes, the Sound Artist LS3 5A. There are only two other speakers that I've had in my home over the last 10 years that I think do both in terms of clarity and tonality to be considered to be close to reference quality, or at least what I would consider close to reference quality. If we're talking about passive speakers, that would be the ATC SEM 19s, and the other one would be my own ProAct Response 1 SEs. Well, here we have a third example. Now let's be honest, both those speakers are a lot more expensive, but they're also larger speakers that are more dynamic and will play better in larger rooms. They're also a touch more open in the mid-range. Tonally, I'd consider the ATCs to be perfectly neutral, where the DALIs are a little bit more like my ProActs, a touch on the romantic side. I'm sure I'll get asked about the similarly priced and also excellent Amphion Argon 1s. The Argon 1s are a larger speaker and it shows the bass digs deeper and they'll deal with those dynamic swings in music a little bit more easily. But when it comes to natural tonality and overall clarity, they fall behind the DALI Menuet SEs. So what about other aspects of the sound performance, for example the high frequencies? Well, you couldn't appreciate the mid-range unless the upper harmonic structures were well preserved in the treble region. That's exactly what you get from a beautifully refined and well extended tweeter. As far as soundstage is concerned, again, It's gloriously wide. That's something that you'd expect from a well-designed small speaker, and the smaller it is, generally the better job they do in that regard. It's also capable of very good soundstage depth if you get the positioning right. So let's get on to that. The DALI Menuet SEs will play very well close to walls. At the end of the day, that's what they're designed to do. They'll also play very well in the near field, for example at the end of a desk where they're only a metre away. And for those of you who like your quiet late night listening sessions, they're a dream in that scenario too. But if you want the ultimate performance from this speaker, there are a couple of things that you need to do that might not be immediately obvious. Move them away from the walls and the soundstage depth and overall clarity will improve significantly. I know this is a small speaker with limited bass, and moving them out will drop the bass off even more. But this is where a subwoofer is essential. I tried it with a REL T7X and that was a beautiful pairing. But I don't think you necessarily need to go as big as that, especially if you're listening close up and in a relatively small room, which is what you should be doing with this speaker in any case. I think something like a REL T5X, because of its smaller size and smaller moving mass as far as the driver is concerned, will be ample and will probably have even better agility in the bass. The other thing is you can't skimp on partnering equipment. I use the Denafrips Pontis 2 DAC at the front end, and ideally you'd want something at that level, although I think you'd probably get away with something like a Denafrips Aries 2 as a starting point. It's not plug and play as far as amplifiers are concerned either. I used a whole host of amplifiers, but the ones that I think are relevant to talk about I'll just share with you here. The top of the range SMSL VMV A2 Class D amplifier that retails for around £750 I thought would make a nice desktop solution with the Menuet SEs. The A2 has very good clarity, but it also has that typical Class D leanness in the mid-range, which doesn't marry up with these speakers very well at all. The Arcam SA10, also in for evaluation, retails for £735 and comes with a built-in ESS Sabre DAC. It fared better than the A2, filling out the mid-range. Although some people would consider it a sensible starting point, I think you need an amplifier with more refinement and better clarity to get these puppies to sing. That's exactly what you'd get from the excellent Exposure 2510, which here in the UK would set you back £1,595. The Exposure is all about mid-range glory, and that's what the DALI Menuet SEs are about as well. And for once, the synergy gods aligned. The Wilsington R8 with upgraded PS Vane tubes, sold directly by China Hi-Fi, is about the same price as the Exposure amplifier. Going off past experience, I'd expect the upgraded R8 to fare a little bit better than the Exposure, building on its strengths and adding a little bit of muscle and authority. That's not what happened. If anything, the Exposure had slightly better grip and control. Now, don't get me wrong, both of these amplifiers fared extremely well. In fact, I'd be delighted with either of them as a partner for the Menuet SEs, but I'm here to report what I find. Before someone says anything, yes, this is a 4-ohm speaker. I tried both the 4 and the 8-ohm taps at the back of the R8. So let's up the ante a little bit with the Hagel H190 and its 150 watts on tap, at around double the price of the Exposure and the Wilsington. So did it increase the overall sense of scale, have greater dynamics and even better grip and control over the speakers? No, not really. All three of these amplifiers drove the DALI Menuet SEs perfectly well. It was just a change in tonal balance, the Hagel being more neutral, the Exposure a touch romanticised, whilst the Wilsington added a little bit more sugar coating again. The DALI Menuet SEs are a beautifully constructed mini monitor with a finish that is generally the preserve of luxury furniture items. They pull off a trick that very few speakers are capable of doing in my experience, having close to reference quality clarity whilst maintaining perfectly natural tonality. They're not for those of you who like to rock out in even moderately sized rooms. Now come on, have you watched through however many minutes of a mini monitor review just to find that out? I think not. Perhaps you're watching just because you like my reviews. I'm not discouraging that by any means. Please carry on. These speakers are for those of you who like to listen to them fairly close up. For whatever reason, they're at the end of a desk in a small space. And as long as you partner them with the appropriate equipment to make them shine, I can think of nothing else around this price that will sound as good. The DALI Menuet SEs get an outstanding from this channel. My question for today is, what would be your preferred near-field setup? That's where you're listening within a couple of meters of your speakers, whether it's in a desktop scenario or elsewhere. And don't just share the speakers, but the rest of the system as well. And don't worry about the price. It could be £100 setup or in the thousands. I don't care about that kind of stuff. Please share in your comment section. I'd love to hear what your suggestions would be. All that remains for me to say is, if you like this video, you like this channel, and you'd like to see it grow, please do that social media stuff if you haven't done already. Hit the like button, share it, subscribe, hit the bell notification. Check me out on Patreon for the consultancy services, the bonus content, and the video meetings that we have from time to time. But for today, for now, a British audiophile, signing off.